Srimad Bhagavatam, 3rd Canto, Volume 2. Translation with elaborate purports by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta, Swami Prabhupada, Founder Acharya of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. Chapter 17. Victory of Hiranyaksha over all the directions of the universe. Text 1. Sri Maitreya said, the demigods, the inhabitants of the higher planets, were freed from all fear upon hearing the cause of the darkness explained by Brahma, who was born from Vishnu. Thus they all returned to their respective planets. Purport. The demigods, who are denizens of higher planets, are also very much afraid of incidents such as the universe is becoming dark, and so they consulted Brahma. This indicates that the quality of fear exists for every living entity in the material world. The four principal activities of material existence are eating, sleeping, fearing, and mating. The fear element exists also in the demigods. On every planet, even in the higher planetary systems, including the moon and the sun, as well as on this earth, the same principles of animal life exist. Otherwise, why are the demigods also afraid of the darkness? The difference between the demigods and ordinary human beings is that the demigods approach authority, whereas the inhabitants of this earth defy authority. If people would only approach the authority, then every adverse condition in this universe could be rectified. Arjuna was also disturbed on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, but he approached the authority, Krishna, and his problem was solved. The conclusive instruction of this incident is that we may be disturbed by some material condition, but if we approach the authority who can actually explain the matter, then our problem is solved. The demigods approached Brahma for the meaning of the disturbance, and after hearing from him, they were satisfied and returned home peacefully. Text 2. The virtuous lady Diti had been very apprehensive of trouble to the gods from the children in her womb. The virtuous lady Diti had been very apprehensive of trouble to the gods from the children in her womb, and her husband predicted the same. She brought forth twin sons after a full 100 years of pregnancy. Text 3. On the birth of the two demons there were many natural disturbances, all very fearful and wonderful, in the heavenly planets, the earthly planets, and in between them. Text 4. There were earthquakes along the mountains on the earth, and it appeared that there was fire everywhere. Many inauspicious planets like Saturn appeared, along with comets, meteors, and thunderbolts. Purport. When natural disturbances occur on a planet, one should understand that a demon must have taken birth there. In the present age, the number of demoniac people is increasing. Therefore, natural disturbances are also increasing. There is no doubt about this, as we can understand from the statements of the Bhagavatam. Text 5. There blew winds which were almost uninviting to the touch, hissing again and again, and uprooting gigantic trees. They had storms for their armies, and clouds of dust for their ensigns. Purport. When there are natural disturbances like blowing cyclones, too much heat or snowfall, and uprooting of trees by hurricanes, it is to be understood that the demoniac population is increasing, and so the natural disturbance is also taking place. There are many countries on the globe, even at the present moment, where all these disturbances are current. This is true all over the world. There is insufficient sunshine, and there are always clouds in the sky, snowfall, and severe cold. These assure that such places are inhabited by demoniac people who are accustomed to all kinds of forbidden sinful activity. Text 6. The luminaries in the heavens were screened by masses of clouds, in which lightning sometimes flashed as though laughing. Darkness reigned everywhere, and nothing could be seen. Text 7. The ocean with its high waves wailed aloud as if stricken with sorrow, and there was a commotion among the creatures inhabiting the ocean. The rivers and lakes were also agitated, and lotuses withered. Text 8. Misty halos appeared around the sun and the moon during solar and lunar eclipses again and again. Claps of thunder were heard even without clouds, and sounds like those of rattling chariots emerged from the mountain caves. Text 9. In the interior of the villages, she-jackals yelled portentously, vomiting strong fire from their mouths, and jackals and owls also joined them with their cries. Text 10. Raising their necks, dogs cried here and there, now in the manner of singing, and now of wailing. Text 11. O Vidura, the asses ran hither and thither in herds, striking the earth with their hard hooves and wildly braying. Purport. Asses also feel very respectable as a race, and when they run in flocks hither and thither in so-called jollity, it is understood to be a bad sign for human society. Text 12. Frightened by the braying of the asses, birds flew shrieking from their nests, while cattle in the cowsheds as well as in the woods passed dung and urine. Text 13. Cows, terrified, yielded blood in place of milk, clouds rained pus, the images of the gods in the temples shed tears, and trees fell down without a blast of wind. Text 14. Ominous planets such as Mars and Saturn shone brighter and surpassed the auspicious ones such as Mercury, Jupiter, and Venus, as well as a number of lunar mansions. Taking seemingly retrograde courses, the planets came in conflict with one another. Purport. The entire universe is moving under the three modes of material nature. Those living entities who are in goodness are called the pious species, pious lands, pious trees, etc. It is similar with the planets also. Many planets are considered pious, and others are considered impious. Saturn and Mars are considered impious. When the pious planets shine very brightly, it is an auspicious sign, but when the inauspicious planets shine very brightly, this is not a very good sign. Text 15. Marking these and many other omens of evil times, everyone but the four sage sons of Brahma, who were aware of the fall of Jaya and Vijaya, and of their birth as Diti's sons, was seized with fear. They did not know the secrets of these portents, and thought that the dissolution of the universe was at hand. Purport. According to Bhagavad Gita, 7th chapter, the laws of nature are so stringent that it is impossible for the living entity to surpass their enforcement. It is also explained that only those who are fully surrendered to Krishna in Krishna consciousness can be saved. We can learn from the description of the Srimad Bhagavatam that it is because of the birth of two great demons that there were so many natural disturbances. It is to be indirectly understood, as previously described, that when there are constant disturbances on the earth, that it is an omen that some demoniac people have been born, or that the demoniac population has increased. In former days there were only two demons, those born of Diti, yet there were so many disturbances. At the present day, especially in this age of Kali, these disturbances are always visible, which indicates that the demoniac population has certainly increased. To check the increase of demoniac population, the Vedic civilization enacted so many rules and regulations of social life, the most important of which is the Garbhadana process for begetting good children. In Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna informed Krishna that if there is unwanted population, Varna Shankara, the entire world will appear to be hell. People are very anxious for peace in the world, but there are so many unwanted children born without the benefit of the Garbhadana ceremony, just like the demons born from Diti. Diti was so lusty that she forced her husband to copulate at a time which was inauspicious, and therefore the demons were born to create disturbances. In having sex life to beget children, one should observe the process of begetting nice children. If each and every householder in every family observes the Vedic system, then there are nice children, not demons, and automatically there is peace in the world. If we do not follow regulations in life for social tranquility, we cannot expect peace. Rather, we will have to undergo the stringent reactions of natural laws. Text 16. These two demons who appeared in ancient times soon began to exhibit uncommon bodily features. They had steel-like frames which began to grow just like two great mountains. Purport. There are two classes of men in the world. One is called the demon, and the other is called the demigod. The demigods concern themselves with the spiritual upliftment of human society, whereas the demons are concerned with physical and material upliftment. The two demons born of Diti began to make their bodies as strong as iron frames, and they were so tall that they seemed to touch outer space. They were decorated with valuable ornaments, and they thought that this was success in life. Originally, it was planned that Jaya and Vijaya, the two doorkeepers of Vaikuntha, were to take birth in this material world, where by the curse of the sages, they were to play the part of always being angry with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. As demoniac persons, they became so angry that they were not concerned with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but simply with physical comforts and physical upliftment. Text 17. Their bodies became so tall that they seemed to kiss the sky with the crests of their gold crowns. They blocked the view of all directions, and while walking shook the earth at every step. Their arms were adorned with brilliant bracelets, and they stood as if covering the sun with their waists, which were bound with excellent and beautiful girdles. Purport. In the demoniac way of civilization, people are interested in getting a body constructed in such a way that when they walk on the street, the earth will tremble, and when they stand, it will appear that they cover the sun and the vision of the four directions. If a race appears strong in body, their country is materially considered to be among the highly advanced nations of the world. Text 18. Kasyapa Prajapati, the creator of the living entities, gave his twin sons their names. The one who was born first he named Hiranyaksha, and the one who was first conceived by Diti he named Hiranyakshipu. Purport. There is an authoritative Vedic literature called Pindasiddhi, in which the scientific understanding of pregnancy is very nicely described. It is stated that when the male secretion enters the menstrual flux in the uterus in 2 successive drops, the mother develops 2 embryos in her womb, and she brings forth twins in a reverse order to that in which they were first conceived. The child conceived first is born later, and the one conceived later is brought forth first. The first child conceived in the womb lives behind the second child, so when birth takes place, the second child appears first, and the first child appears second. In this case, it is understood that Hiranyaksha, the second child conceived, was delivered first, whereas Hiranyakshipu, the child who was behind him, having been conceived first, was born second. Text 19. The elder child, Hiranyakshipu, was unafraid of death from anyone within the 3 worlds because he received a benediction from Lord Brahma. He was proud and puffed up due to this benediction and was able to bring all 3 planetary systems under his control. Purport. As will be revealed in later chapters, Hiranyakshipu underwent severe austerity and penance to satisfy Brahma and thus receive a benediction of immortality. Actually, it is impossible even for Lord Brahma to give anyone the benediction of becoming immortal, but indirectly Hiranyakshipu received the benediction that no one within this material world would be able to kill him. In other words, because he originally came from the abode of Vaikuntha, he was not to be killed by anyone within this material world. The Lord desired to appear himself to kill him. One may be very proud of his material advancement in knowledge, but he cannot be immune to the 4 principles of material existence, namely birth, death, old age, and disease. It was the Lord's plan to teach people that even Hiranyakshipu, who was so powerful and strongly built, could not live more than his destined duration of life. One may become as strong and puffed up as Hiranyakshipu and bring under his control all the 3 worlds, but there is no possibility of continuing life eternally or keeping the conquered booty forever. So many emperors have ascended to power, and they are now lost in oblivion. That is the history of the world. Text 20. His younger brother, Hiranyaksha, was always ready to satisfy his elder brother by his activities. Hiranyaksha took a club on his shoulder and traveled all over the universe with a fighting spirit just to satisfy Hiranyakshipu. Purport. The demoniac spirit is to train all family members to exploit the resources of this universe for personal sense gratification, whereas the godly spirit is to engage everything in the service of the Lord. Hiranyakshipu was himself very powerful, and he made his younger brother Hiranyaksha powerful to assist him in fighting with everyone and lording it over material nature as long as possible. If possible, he wanted to rule the universe eternally. These are demonstrations of the spirit of the demoniac living entity. Text 21. Hiranyaksha's temper was difficult to control. He had anklets of gold tinkling about his feet. He was adorned with a gigantic garland, and he rested his huge mace on one of his shoulders. Text 22. His mental and bodily strength, as well as the boon conferred upon him, had made him proud. He feared death at the hands of no one, and there was no checking him. The gods, therefore, were seized with fear at his very sight, and they hid themselves even as snakes hide themselves for fear of Garuda. Purport: the Asuras are generally strongly built, as described here, and therefore their mental condition is very sound, and their prowess is also extraordinary. Hiranyaksha and Hiranyakshipu, having received the boon that they would not be killed by any other living entity within this universe, were almost immortal, and thus they were completely fearless. Text 23. On not finding Indra and the other demigods who had previously been intoxicated with power, the chief of the Daityas, seeing that they had all vanished before his sight, roared loudly. Text 24. After returning from the heavenly kingdom, the mighty demon, who was like an elephant in wrath, for the sake of sport, dived into the deep ocean, which was roaring terribly. Text 25. On his entering the ocean, the aquatic animals who formed the host of Varuna were stricken with fear and ran far away. Thus Hiranyaksha showed his splendor without dealing a blow. Purport: materialistic demons sometimes appear to be very powerful and are seen to establish their supremacy throughout the world. Here also it appears that Hiranyaksha, by his demoniac strength, actually established his supremacy throughout the universe, and the demigods were afraid of his uncommon power. Not only were the demigods in space afraid of the demons Hiranyakshipu and Hiranyaksha, but so also were the aquatic animals within the sea. Text 26. Moving about in the ocean for many, many years, the mighty Hiranyaksha smote the gigantic wind-tossed waves again and again with his iron mace, and reached Vibhavari, the capital of Varuna. Purport: Varuna is supposed to be the predominating deity of the waters, and his capital, which is known as Vibhavari, is within the watery kingdom. Text 27. Vibhavari is the home of Varuna, lord of the aquatic creatures, and guardian of the lower regions of the universe, where the demons generally reside. There Hiranyaksha fell at Varuna's feet like a low-born man, and to make fun of him he said with a smile, "Give me battle, O Supreme Lord." Purport: the demoniac person always challenges others and tries to occupy others' property by force. Here these symptoms are fully displayed by Hiranyaksha, who begged war from a person who had no desire to fight. Text 28. You are the guardian of an entire sphere and a ruler of wide fame. Having crushed the might of arrogant and conceited warriors, and having conquered all the Daityas and Danavas in the world, you once performed a Rajasuya sacrifice to the Lord. Text 29. Thus mocked by an enemy whose vanity knew no bounds, the worshipful lord of the waters waxed angry, but by dint of his reason he managed to curb the anger that had sprung up in him, and he replied, "O dear one, we have now desisted from warfare, having grown too old for combat." Purport: as we see, warmongering materialists always create fighting without reason. Text 30. You are so skilled in war that I do not see anyone else but the most ancient person, Lord Vishnu, who can give satisfaction in battle to you. Therefore, O chief of the Asuras, approach him, whom even heroes like you mention with praise. Purport: aggressive materialistic warriors are actually punished by the Supreme Lord for their policy of unnecessarily disturbing world peace. Therefore Varuna advised Hiranyaksha that the right course to satisfy his fighting spirit would be to seek to fight with Vishnu. Text 31. Varuna continued, on reaching him you will be rid of your pride at once, and will lie down on the field of battle, surrounded by dogs, for eternal sleep. It is in order to exterminate wicked fellows like you, and to show his grace to the virtuous, that he assumes his various incarnations, like Varaha. Purport: Asuras do not know that their bodies consist of the 5 elements of material nature, and that when they fall they become objects of pastimes for dogs and vultures. Varuna advised Hiranyaksha to meet Vishnu in his boar incarnation, so that his hankering for aggressive war would be satisfied, and his powerful body would be vanquished. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta Purports of the 3rd Canto's 17th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled Victory of Hiranyaksha over all the directions of the universe. Chapter 18. The battle between Lord Boar and the demon Hiranyaksha. Text 1. Maitreya continued, the proud and falsely glorious Daitya paid little heed to the words of Varuna. O dear Vidura, he learned from Narada the whereabouts of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and hurriedly betook himself to the depths of the ocean. Purport. Materialistic warmongers are not even afraid to fight with their mightiest enemy, the personality of Godhead. The demon was very encouraged to learn from Varuna that there was one fighter who could actually combat him. And he was very enthusiastic to search out the Supreme Personality of Godhead just to give him a fight, even though it was predicted by Varuna that by fighting with Vishnu, he would become prey for dogs, jackals, and vultures. Since demoniac persons are less intelligent, they dare to fight with Vishnu, who is known as Ajita, or one who has never been conquered. Text 2. He saw there the all-powerful personality of Godhead in his boar incarnation, bearing the earth upward on the ends of his tusks, and robbing him of his splendor with his reddish eyes. The demon laughed, "Oh, an amphibious beast." Purport. In a previous chapter, we have discussed the incarnation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead as Varaha, the boar, while Varaha, with his tusks, engaged in uplifting the submerged earth from the depths of the waters. This great demon Hiranyaksha met him and challenged him, calling him a beast. Demons cannot understand the incarnations of the Lord. They think that his incarnations as a fish or boar or tortoise are big beasts only. They misunderstand the body of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, even in his human form, and they deride his descent. In the Chaitanya Sampradaya, there is sometimes a demoniac misconception about the descent of Nityananda Prabhu. Nityananda Prabhu's body is spiritual, but demoniac persons consider the body of the Supreme Personality to be material, just like ours. Avajananti Mammudha, persons who have no intelligence deride the transcendental form of the Lord as material. Text 3. The demon addressed the Lord, O best of the demigods, dressed in the form of a boar, just hear me. This earth is entrusted to us, the inhabitants of the lower regions, and you cannot take it from my presence and not be hurt by me. Purport. Sridhara Swami, commenting on this verse, states that although the demon wanted to deride the personality of Godhead in the form of a boar, actually he worshipped him in several words. For example, he addressed him as Vanagochara, which means one who is a resident of the forest. But another meaning of Vanagochara is one who lies on the water. Vishnu lies on the water, so the Supreme Personality of Godhead can be properly addressed in this way. The demon also addressed him as Mirga, indicating unintentionally that the Supreme Personality is sought after by great sages, saintly persons, and transcendentalists. He also addressed him as Ajna. Sridhara Swami says that Jna means knowledge, and there is no knowledge which is unknown to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Indirectly, therefore, the demon said that Vishnu knows everything. The demon addressed him as Suradama. Sura means the demigods, and Adama means Lord of all there is. He is Lord of all the demigods, therefore he is the best of all demigods, or God. When the demon used the phrase, in my presence, the implied meaning was, in spite of my presence, you are completely able to take away the earth. Nasvasti yasyasi, unless you kindly take this earth from our custody, there can be no good fortune for us. Text 4. You rascal, you have been nourished by our enemies to kill us, and you have killed some demons by remaining invisible. O fool, your power is only mystic, so today I shall enliven my kinsmen by killing you. Purport. The demon used the word abhavaya, which means for killing. Sridhara Swami comments that this killing means liberating, or in other words, killing the process of continued birth and death. The Lord kills the process of birth and death and keeps himself invisible. The activities of the Lord's internal potency are inconceivable, but by a slight exhibition of this potency, the Lord by his grace can deliver one from nescience. Sucha means miseries. The miseries of material existence can be extinguished by the Lord by his potential energy of internal yogamaya. In the Upanishads, Shvetashvatara Upanishad 6.8, it is stated, Parasya Shaktir Vividyaiva Shriyate. The Lord is invisible to the eyes of the common man, but his energies act in various ways. When demons are in adversity, they think that God is hiding himself and is working by his mystic potency. They think that if they can find God, they can kill him just by seeing him. Hiranyaksha thought that way, and he challenged the Lord. You have done tremendous harm to our community, taking the part of the demigods, and you have killed our kinsmen in so many ways, always keeping yourself hidden. Now I see you face to face, and I am not going to let you go. I shall kill you and save my kinsmen from your mystic misdeeds. Not only are demons always anxious to kill God with words and philosophy, but they think that if one is materially powerful, he can kill God with materially fatal weapons. Demons like Kamsa, Ravana, and Hiranyakshipu thought themselves powerful enough to kill even God. Demons cannot understand that God, by his multifarious potencies, can work so wonderfully that he can be present everywhere and still remain in his eternal abode, Goloka Vrindavana. Text 5. The demon continued, When you fall dead with your skull smashed by the mace hurled by my arms, the demigods and sages who offer you oblations and sacrifice in devotional service will also automatically cease to exist, like trees without roots. Purport. Demons are very much disturbed when devotees worship the Lord in the prescribed ways recommended in the scriptures. In the Vedic scriptures, the neophyte devotees are advised to engage in 9 kinds of devotional service, such as to hear and chant the holy name of God, to remember him always, to chant on beads Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, to worship the Lord in the form of his deity incarnation in the temples, and to engage in various activities of Krishna consciousness to increase the number of godly persons for perfect peace in the world. Demons do not like such activity. They are always envious of God and his devotees. Their propaganda not to worship in the temple or church, simply to make material advancement for satisfaction of the senses, is always current. The demon Hiranyaksha, upon seeing the Lord face to face, wanted to make a permanent solution by killing the personality of Godhead with his powerful mace. The example of an uprooted tree mentioned here by the demon is very significant. Devotees accept that God is the root of everything. Their example is that just as the stomach is the source of energy of all the limbs of the body, God is the original source of all energy manifested in the material and spiritual worlds. Therefore, as supplying food to the stomach is the process to satisfy all the limbs of the body, Krishna consciousness, or developing love of Krishna, is the sublime method for satisfying the source of all happiness. The demon wants to uproot this source because if the root, God, were to be checked, the activities of the Lord and the devotees would automatically stop. The demon would be very much satisfied by such a situation in society. Demons are always anxious to have a godless society for their sense gratification. According to Sridhara Swami, this verse means that when the demon would be deprived of his mace by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, not only the neophyte devotees, but also the ancient sagacious devotees of the Lord would be very much satisfied. Text 6. Although the Lord was pained by the shaft-like abusive words of the demon, he bore the pain. But seeing that the earth on the ends of his tusks was frightened, he rose out of the water just as an elephant emerges with its female companion when assailed by an alligator. Purport. The Mayavadi philosopher cannot understand that the Lord has feelings. The Lord is satisfied if someone offers him a nice prayer, and similarly, if someone decries his existence or calls him by ill names, God is dissatisfied. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is decried by the Mayavadi philosophers, who are almost demons. They say that God has no head, no form, no existence, and no legs, hands, or other bodily limbs. In other words, they say that he is dead or lame. All these misconceptions of the Supreme Lord are a source of dissatisfaction to him. He is never pleased with such atheistic descriptions. In this case, although the Lord felt sorrow from the piercing words of the demon, he delivered the earth for the satisfaction of the demigods, who are ever his devotees. The conclusion is that God is as sentient as we are. He is satisfied by our prayers and dissatisfied by our harsh words against him. In order to give protection to his devotee, he is always ready to tolerate insulting words from the atheists. Text 7. The demon who had golden hair on his head and fearful tusks gave chase to the Lord while he was rising from the water, even as an alligator would chase an elephant. Roaring like thunder, he said, "Are you not ashamed of running away before a challenging adversary? There is nothing reproachable for shameless creatures." Purport: When the Lord was coming out of the water, taking the earth in his arms to deliver it, the demon derided him with insulting words. But the Lord did not care, because he was very conscious of his duty. For a dutiful man there is nothing to fear. Similarly, those who are powerful have no fear of derision or unkind words from an enemy. The Lord had nothing to fear from anyone, yet he was merciful to his enemy by neglecting him. Although apparently he fled from the challenge, it was just to protect the earth from calamity that he tolerated Hiranyaksha's deriding words. Text 8. The Lord placed the earth within his sight on the surface of the water and transferred to her his own energy in the form of the ability to float on the water. While the enemy stood looking on, Brahma, the creator of the universe, extolled the Lord, and the other demigods rained flowers on him. Purport: Those who are demons cannot understand how the Supreme Personality of Godhead floated the earth on water, but to devotees of the Lord this is not a very wonderful act. Not only the earth but many, many millions of planets are floating in the air, and this floating power is endowed upon them by the Lord. There is no other possible explanation. The materialist can explain that the planets are floating by the law of gravitation, but the law of gravitation works under the control or direction of the Supreme Lord. That is the version of Bhagavad Gita which confirms, by the Lord's statement, that behind the material laws or nature's laws, and behind the growth, maintenance, production, and evolution of all the planetary systems, behind everything is the Lord's direction. The Lord's activities could be appreciated only by the demigods, headed by Brahma, and therefore when they saw the uncommon prowess of the Lord in keeping the earth on the surface of the water, they showered flowers on him in appreciation of his transcendental activity. Text 9. The demon who had a wealth of ornaments, bangles, and beautiful golden armor on his body chased the Lord from behind with a great mace. The Lord tolerated his piercing ill words, but in order to reply to him, he expressed his terrible anger. Purport: The Lord could have chastised the demon immediately while the demon was deriding the Lord with ill words, but the Lord tolerated him to please the demigods and to show that they should not be afraid of demons while discharging their duties. Therefore his toleration was displayed mainly to drive away the fears of the demigods, who would show that the Lord is always present to protect them. The demon's derision of the Lord was just like the barking of dogs. The Lord did not care about it, since he was doing his own work and delivering the earth from the midst of the water. Materialistic demons always possess large amounts of gold in various shapes, and they think that a large amount of gold, physical strength, and popularity can save them from the wrath of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Text 10. The Personality of Godhead said, "Indeed, we are creatures of the jungle, and we are searching after hunting dogs like you. One who is freed from the entanglement of death has no fear from the loose talk in which you are indulging, for you are bound up by the laws of death." Purport: Demons and atheistic persons can go on insulting the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but they forget that they are subjected to the laws of birth and death. They think that simply by decrying the existence of the Supreme Lord, or defying his stringent laws of nature, one can be freed from the clutches of birth and death. In Bhagavad Gita, it is said that simply by understanding the transcendental nature of God, one can go back home, back to Godhead. But demons and atheistic persons do not try to understand the nature of the Supreme Lord. Therefore they remain in the entanglement of birth and death. Text 11. Certainly we have stolen the charge of the inhabitants of Rasatala and have lost all shame. Although bitten by your powerful mace, I shall stay here in the water for some time, because having created enmity with a powerful enemy, I now have no place to go. Purport: The demon should have known that God cannot be driven out of any place, for he is all-pervading. Demons think of their possessions as their property, but actually everything belongs to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who can take anything at any time he likes. Text 12. You are supposed to be the commander of many foot soldiers, and now you may take prompt steps to overthrow us. Give up all your foolish talk and wipe out the cares of your kith and kin by slaying us. One may be proud, yet he does not deserve a seat in an assembly if he fails to fulfill his promised word. Purport: a demon may be a great soldier and commander of a great number of infantry, but in the presence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he is powerless and is destined to die. The Lord therefore challenged the demon not to go away, but to fulfill his promised word to kill him. Text 13. Sri Maitreya said, the demon, being thus challenged by the personality of Godhead, became angry and agitated, and he trembled in anger like a challenged cobra. Purport: a cobra is very fierce before ordinary persons, but before an enchanter who can play with him, he is a plaything. Similarly, a demon may be very powerful in his own domain, but before the Lord he is insignificant. The demon Ravana was a fierce figure before the demigods, but when he was before Lord Ramachandra, he trembled and prayed to his deity, Lord Shiva, but to no avail. Text 14. Hissing indignantly, all his senses shaken by wrath, the demon quickly sprang upon the Lord and dealt him a blow with his powerful mace. Text 15. The Lord, however, by moving slightly aside, dodged the violent mace blow aimed at his breast by the enemy, just as an accomplished yogi would elude death. Purport: the example is given herein that the perfect yogi can overcome a death blow, although it is offered by the laws of nature. It is useless for a demon to beat the transcendental body of the Lord with a powerful mace, for no one can surpass his prowess. Those who are advanced transcendentalists are freed from the laws of nature, and even a death blow cannot act on them. Significantly, it may be seen that a yogi is attacked by a death blow, but by the grace of the Lord he can overcome many such attacks for the service of the Lord. As the Lord exists by his own independent prowess, by the grace of the Lord, the devotees also exist for his service. Text 16. The personality of Godhead now exhibited his anger and rushed to meet the demon, who bit his lip in rage, took up his mace again, and began to repeatedly brandish it about. Text 17. Then with his mace the Lord struck the enemy on the right of his brow, but since the demon was expert in fighting, O gentle Vidura, he protected himself by a maneuver of his own mace. Text 18. In this way the demon Haraksha and the Lord, the personality of Godhead, struck each other with their huge maces, each enraged and seeking his own victory. Purport: Haryaksha is another name for Hiranyaksha, the demon. Text 19. There was keen rivalry between the two combatants. Both had sustained injuries on their bodies from the blows of each other's pointed maces, and each grew more and more enraged at the smell of blood on his person. In their eagerness to win, they performed maneuvers of various kinds, and their contest looked like an encounter between two forceful bulls for the sake of a cow. Purport: here the earth planet is called Ila. This earth was formerly known as Ilavartavarsha, and when Maharaja Parikshit ruled the earth it was called Bharatavarsha. Actually, Bharatavarsha is the name for the entire planet, but gradually Bharatavarsha has come to mean India. As India has recently been divided into Pakistan and Hindustan, similarly the earth was formerly called Ilavartavarsha, but gradually as time passed, it was divided by national boundaries. Text 20. O descendant of Kuru, Brahma, the most independent demigod of the universe, accompanied by his followers, came to see the terrible fight for the sake of the world between the demon and the personality of Godhead, who appeared in the form of a boar. Purport: the fight between the Lord, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and the demon is compared to a fight between bulls for the sake of a cow. The earth planet is also called Go, or cow, but bulls fight between themselves to ascertain who will have union with a cow. There is always a constant fight between the demons and the Supreme Lord, or his representative, for supremacy over the earth. Here the Lord is significantly described as Yajnavayava. One should not consider the Lord to have the body of an ordinary boar. He can assume any form, and he possesses all such forms eternally. It is from him that all other forms have emanated. This boar form is not to be considered the form of an ordinary hog. His body is actually full of yajna, or worshipful offerings. Yajna, sacrifices, are offered to Vishnu. Yajna means the body of Vishnu. His body is not material, therefore he should not be taken to be an ordinary boar. Brahma is described in this verse as Svarat. Actually, full independence is exclusive to the Lord himself, but as part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, every living entity has a minute quantity of independence. Each and every one of the living entities within this universe has this minute independence, but Brahma, being the chief of all living entities, has a greater potential of independence than any other. He is the representative of Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and has been assigned to preside over universal affairs. All other demigods work for him. Therefore he is described here as Svarat. He is always accompanied by great sages and transcendentalists, all of whom came to see the bullfight between the demon and the Lord. Text 21. After arriving at the place of combat, Brahma, the leader of thousands of sages and transcendentalists, saw the demon who had attained such unprecedented power that no one could fight with him. Brahma then addressed Narayana, who was assuming the form of a boar for the first time. Text 22 through 23. Lord Brahma said, "My dear Lord, this demon has proved to be a constant pinprick to the demigods, the brahmanas, the cows, and innocent persons who are spotless and always dependent upon worshipping your lotus feet. He has become a source of fear by unnecessarily harassing them. Since he has attained a boon from me, he has become a demon, always searching for a proper combatant, wandering all over the universe for this infamous purpose." Purport. There are two classes of living entities. One is called Shura, or the demigods, and the other is called Ashura, or the demons. Demons are generally fond of worshipping the demigods, and there are evidences that by such worship they get extensive power for their sense gratification. This later proves to be a cause of trouble to the brahmanas, demigods, and other innocent living entities. Demons habitually find fault with the demigods, brahmanas, and innocent, to whom they are a constant source of fear. The way of the demon is to take power from the demigods and then tease the demigods themselves. There is an instance of a great devotee of Lord Shiva who obtained a boon from Lord Shiva that the head of whomever he touched with his hand would come off its trunk. As soon as the boon was offered to him, the demon wanted to touch the very head of Lord Shiva. That is their way. The devotees of the Supreme Personality of Godhead do not, however, ask any favor for sense gratification. Even if they are offered liberation, they refuse it. They are happy simply engaging in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. Text 24. Lord Brahma continued, "My dear Lord, there is no need to play with this serpentine demon, who is always very skilled in conjuring tricks, and is arrogant, self-sufficient, and most wicked." Purport. No one is unhappy when a serpent is killed. It is a practice among village boys to catch a serpent by the tail and play with it for some time, and then kill it. Similarly, the Lord could have killed the demon at once, but he played with him in the same way as a child plays with a snake before killing it. Brahma requested, however, that since the demon was more wicked and undesirable than a serpent, there was no need to play with him. It was his wish that he be killed at once, without delay. Text 25. Brahma continued, "My dear Lord, you are infallible. Please kill this sinful demon before the demoniac hour arrives, and he presents another formidable approach favorable to him. You can kill him by your internal potency without doubt." Text 26. My Lord, the darkest evening, which covers the world, is fast approaching. Since you are the soul of all souls, kindly kill him and win victory for the demigods. Text 27. The auspicious period known as Abhijit, which is most opportune for victory, commenced at midday and has all but passed. Therefore, in the interest of your friends, please dispose of this formidable foe quickly. Text 28. This demon, luckily for us, has come of his own accord to you, his death ordained by you. Therefore, exhibiting your ways, kill him in the duel and establish the worlds in peace. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta Purports of the 3rd Canto, 18th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled The Battle Between Lord Boar and the Demon Hiranyaksha. Chapter 19. The Killing of the Demon Hiranyaksha. Text 1. Sri Maitreya said, after hearing the words of Brahma, the Creator, which were free from all sinful purposes, and as sweet as nectar, the Lord heartily laughed and accepted his prayer with a glance laden with love. Purport. The word nirvyalika is very significant. The prayers of the demigods or devotees of the Lord are free from all sinful purposes, but the prayers of demons are always filled with sinful purposes. The demon Hiranyaksha became powerful by deriving a boon from Brahma, and after attaining that boon, he created a disturbance because of his sinful intentions. The prayers of Brahma and other demigods are not to be compared to the prayers of the demons. Their purpose is to please the Supreme Lord. Therefore the Lord smiled and accepted the prayer to kill the demon. Demons who are never interested in praising the Supreme Personality of Godhead because they have no information of him go to the demigods, and in Bhagavad Gita this is condemned. Persons who go to the demigods and pray for advancement in sinful activities are considered to be bereft of all intelligence. Demons have lost all intelligence because they do not know what is actually their self-interest. Even if they have information of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, they decline to approach him. It is not possible for them to get their desired boons from the Supreme Lord, because their purposes are always sinful. It is said that the dacoits in Bengal used to worship the goddess Kali for fulfillment of their sinful desires to plunder others' property, but they never went to a Vishnu temple because they might have been unsuccessful in praying to Vishnu. Therefore the prayers of the demigods or the devotees of the Supreme Personality of Godhead are always untinged by sinful purposes. Text 2. The Lord, who had appeared from the nostril of Brahma, sprang and aimed his mace at the chin of his enemy, the Hiranyaksha demon, who was stalking fearlessly before him. Text 3. Struck by the demon's mace, however, the Lord's mace slipped from his hand and looked splendid as it fell down whirling. This was miraculous, for the mace was blazing wonderful. Text 4. Even though the demon had an excellent opportunity to strike his unarmed foe without obstruction, he respected the law of single combat, thereby kindling the fury of the Supreme Lord. Text 5. As the Lord's mace fell to the ground and a cry of alarm arose from the witnessing crowds of gods and rishis, the personality of Godhead acknowledged the demon's love of righteousness and therefore invoked his Sudarshana discus. Text 6. As the discus began to revolve in the Lord's hands, and the Lord contended at close quarters with the chief of his Vaikuntha attendants, who had been born as Hiranyaksha, a vile son of Diti, there issued from every direction strange expressions uttered by those who were witnessing from airplanes. They had no knowledge of the Lord's reality, and they cried, "May victory attend you! Pray dispatch him! Play no more with him!" Text 7. When the demon saw the personality of Godhead, who had eyes just like lotus petals, standing in position before him, armed with his Sudarshana discus, his senses were overpowered by indignation. He began to hiss like a serpent, and he bit his lip in great resentment. Text 8. The demon, who had fearful tusks, stared at the personality of Godhead as though to burn him. Springing into the air, he aimed his mace at the Lord, exclaiming at the same time, "You are slain." Text 9. O saintly Vidura, while his enemy looked on, the Lord in his boar form, the enjoyer of all sacrificial offerings, playfully knocked down the mace with his left foot, even as it came upon him with the force of a tempest. Text 10. The Lord then said, "Take up your weapon and try again, eager as you are to conquer me." Challenged in these words, the demon aimed his mace at the Lord, and once more loudly roared. Text 11. When the Lord saw the mace flying toward him, he stood firmly where he was, and caught it with the same ease as Garuda, the king of birds, would seize a serpent. Text 12. His valor thus frustrated, the great demon felt humiliated and was put out of countenance. He was reluctant to take back the mace when it was offered by the personality of Godhead. Text 13. He now took a trident, which was as rapacious as a flaming fire, and hurled it against the Lord, the enjoyer of all sacrifices, even as one would use penance for a malevolent purpose against a holy Brahmana. Text 14. Hurled by the mighty demon with all his strength, the flying trident shone brightly in the sky. The personality of Godhead, however, tore it to pieces with his discus Sudarshana, which had a sharp-edged rim, even as Indra cut off a wing of Garuda. Purport. The context of the reference given herein regarding Garuda and Indra is this. Once upon a time, Garuda, the carrier of the Lord, snatched away a nectar pot from the hands of the demigods in heaven in order to liberate his mother, Vinata, from the clutches of his stepmother, Kadru, the mother of the serpents. On learning of this, Indra, the king of heaven, hurled his thunderbolt against Garuda. With a view to respect the infallibility of Indra's weapon, Garuda, though otherwise invincible, being the Lord's own mount, dropped one of his wings, which was shattered to pieces by the thunderbolt. The inhabitants of higher planets are so sensible that even in the process of fighting they observe the preliminary rules and regulations of gentleness. In this case, Garuda wanted to show respect for Indra. Since he knew that Indra's weapon must destroy something, he offered his wing. Text 15. The demon was enraged when his trident was cut to pieces by the discus of the personality of Godhead. He therefore advanced toward the Lord, and roaring aloud, struck his hard fist against the Lord's broad chest, which bore the mark of Srivatsa. Then he went out of sight. Purport. Srivatsa is a curl of white hair on the chest of the Lord, which is a special sign of his being the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In Vaikuntha Loka, or in Goloka Vrindavana, the inhabitants are exactly of the same form as the Personality of Godhead, but by this Srivatsa mark on the chest of the Lord, he is distinguished from all others. Text 16. Hit in this manner by the demon, Ovidura, the Lord, who had appeared as the first boar, did not feel the least quaking in any part of his body, any more than an elephant would when struck with a wreath of flowers. Purport. As previously explained, the demon was originally a servitor of the Lord in Vaikuntha, but somehow or other he fell as a demon. His fight with the Supreme Lord was meant for his liberation. The Lord enjoyed the striking on his transcendental body, just like a fully grown-up father fighting with his child. Sometimes a father takes pleasure in having a mock fight with his small child, and similarly the Lord felt Hiranyaksha's striking on his body to be like flowers offered for worship. In other words, the Lord desired to fight in order to enjoy his transcendental bliss. Therefore he enjoyed the attack. Text 17. The demon, however, employed many conjuring tricks against the personality of Godhead, who is the Lord of Yoga Maya. At the sight of this, the people were filled with alarm and thought that the dissolution of the universe was near. Purport. The fighting enjoyment of the Supreme Lord with his devotee, who had been converted into a demon, appeared severe enough to bring about the dissolution of the universe. This is the greatness of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Even the wavering of his little finger appears to be a great and very dangerous movement in the eyes of the inhabitants of the universe. Text 18. Fierce winds began to blow from all directions, spreading darkness occasioned by dust and hailstorms. Stones came in volleys from every corner, as if thrown by machine guns. Text 19. The luminaries in outer space disappeared due to the skies being overcast with masses of clouds, which were accompanied by lightning and thunder. The sky rained pus, hair, blood, stool, urine, and bones. Text 20. O sinless Vidura, mountains discharged weapons of various kinds, and naked demonesses armed with tridents appeared with their hair hanging loose. Text 21. Cruel and savage slogans were uttered by hosts of ruffian yakshas and rakshasas, who all either marched on foot or rode on horses, elephants, or chariots. Text 22. The Lord, the personal enjoyer of all sacrifices, now discharged his beloved Sudarshana, which was capable of dispersing the magical forces displayed by the demon. Purport. Even famous yogis and demons can sometimes enact very magical feats by their mystic power, but in the presence of the Sudarshana chakra, when it is let loose by the Lord, all such magical jugglery is dispersed. The instance of the quarrel between Durvasha Muni and Maharaja Ambarisha is a practical example in this matter. Durvasha Muni wanted to display many magical wonders, but when the Sudarshana Chakra appeared, Durvasha himself was afraid and fled to various planets for his personal protection. The Lord is described here as Tripat, which means that he is the enjoyer of three kinds of sacrifices. In Bhagavad Gita, the Lord confirms that he is the beneficiary and enjoyer of all sacrifices, penances, and austerities. The Lord is the enjoyer of three kinds of yajna. As further described in Bhagavad Gita, there are sacrifices of goods, sacrifices of meditation, and sacrifices of philosophical speculation. Those on the paths of jnana, yoga, and karma all have to come in the end to the Supreme Lord, because Vasudeva Sarvam Iti, the Supreme Lord, is the ultimate enjoyer of everything. That is the perfection of all sacrifice. Text 23. At that very moment, a shudder suddenly ran through the heart of Diti, the mother of Hiranyaksha. She recalled the words of her husband Kasyapa, and blood flowed from her breasts. Purport. At Hiranyaksha's last moment, his mother, Diti, remembered what her husband had said. Although her sons would be demons, they would have the advantage of being killed by the personality of Godhead himself. She remembered this incident by the grace of the Lord, and her breast flowed blood instead of milk. In many instances, we find that when a mother is moved by affection for her sons, milk flows from her breasts. In the case of the demon's mother, the blood could not transform into milk, but it flowed down her breasts as it was. Blood transforms into milk. To drink milk is auspicious, but to drink blood is inauspicious, although they are one and the same thing. This formula is applicable in the case of cow's milk also. Text 24. When the demon saw his magic forces dispelled, he once again came into the presence of the personality of Godhead, Keshava, and, full of rage, tried to embrace him within his arms to crush him. But to his great amazement, he found the Lord standing outside the circle of his arms. Purport. In this verse, the Lord is addressed as Keshava because he killed the demon Keshi in the beginning of creation. Keshava is also a name of Krishna. Krishna is the origin of all incarnations, and it is confirmed in Brahma Samhita that Govinda, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the cause of all causes, exists simultaneously in his different incarnations and expansions. The demon's attempt to measure the Supreme Personality of Godhead is significant. The demon wanted to embrace him with his arms, thinking that with his limited arms he could capture the Absolute by material power. He did not know that God is the greatest of the great and the smallest of the small. No one can capture the Supreme Lord or bring him under his control. But the demoniac person always attempts to measure the length and breadth of the Supreme Lord. By his inconceivable potency, the Lord can become the universal form, as explained in Bhagavad Gita, and at the same time he can remain within the box of his devotees as their worshipable deity. There are many devotees who keep a statue of the Lord in a small box and carry it with them everywhere. Every morning they worship the Lord in the box. The Supreme Lord Keshava, or the personality of Godhead Krishna, is not bound by any measurement of our calculation. He can remain with his devotee in any suitable form, yet he is unapproachable by any amount of demoniac activities. Text 25. The demon now began to strike the Lord with his hard fists, but Lord Adakshaja slapped him in the root of the ear, even as Indra, the lord of the Maruts, hit the demon Vitra. Purport. The Lord is explained here to be Adaksaja, beyond the reach of all material calculation. Aksaja means the measurement of our senses, and Adaksaja means that which is beyond the measurement of our senses. Text 26. Though struck indifferently by the Lord, the conqueror of all, the demon's body began to wheel. His eyeballs bulged out of their sockets, his arms and legs broken, and the hair of his head scattered. He fell down dead, like a gigantic tree uprooted by the wind. Purport. It does not take even a moment for the Lord to kill any powerful demon, including Hiranyaksha. The Lord could have killed him long before, but he allowed the demon to display the full extent of his magical feats. One may know that by magical feats, by scientific advancement of knowledge, or by material power, one cannot become the equal of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. His one signal is sufficient to destroy all our attempts. His inconceivable power, as displayed here, is so strong that the demon, despite all his demoniac maneuvers, was killed by the Lord when the Lord desired, simply by one slap. Text 27. Aja, Brahma, and others arrived on the spot to see the fearfully tusked demon lying on the ground, biting his lip. The glow of his face was yet unfaded, and Brahma admiringly said, "Oh, who could meet such blessed death?" Purport: although the demon was dead, his bodily luster was unfaded. This is very peculiar, because when a man or animal is dead, the body immediately becomes pale, the luster gradually fades, and decomposition takes place. But here, although Hiranyaksha lay dead, his bodily luster was unfaded, because the Lord, the Supreme Spirit, was touching his body. One's bodily luster remains fresh only as long as the spirit soul is present. Although the demon's soul had departed his body, the Supreme Spirit touched the body, and therefore his bodily luster did not fade. The individual soul is different from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. One who sees the Supreme Personality of Godhead when he quits his body is certainly very fortunate, and therefore personalities like Brahma and the other demigods eulogize the death of the demon. Text 28. Brahma continued, "He was struck by a foreroot of the Lord, whom yogis, seeking freedom from their unreal material bodies, meditate upon in seclusion and mystic trance. While gazing on his countenance, this crest jewel of Diti's sons has cast off his mortal coil." Purport: the process of yoga is very clearly described in this verse of Srimad Bhagavatam. It is said here that the ultimate end of the yogis and mystics who perform meditation is to get rid of this material body. Therefore they meditate in secluded places to attain yogic trance. Yoga has to be performed in a secluded place, not in public or in a demonstration on stage, as nowadays practiced by many so-called yogis. Real yoga aims at ridding one of the material body. Yoga practice is not intended to keep the body fit and young. Such advertisements of so-called yoga are not approved by any standard method. Particularly mentioned in this verse is the word yam, or unto whom, indicating that meditation should be targeted on the personality of Godhead. Even if one concentrates his mind on the Boar form of the Lord, that is also yoga. As confirmed in Bhagavad Gita, one who concentrates his mind constantly in meditation upon the personality of Godhead, in one of his many varieties of forms, is the first-class yogi, and he can very easily attain trance simply by meditating upon the form of the Lord. If one is able to continue such meditation on the Lord's form, at the time of one's death, one is liberated from this mortal body and is transferred to the kingdom of God. This opportunity was given to the demon by the Lord, and therefore Brahma and other demigods were astonished. In other words, the perfection of yoga practice can be attained by a demon also, if he is simply kicked by the Lord. Text 29. These two personal assistants of the Supreme Lord, having been cursed, have been destined to take birth in demoniac families. After a few such births, they will return to their own positions. Text 30. The demigods address the Lord, "All obeisance is unto you. You are the enjoyer of all sacrifices, and you have assumed the form of a boar in pure goodness, for the purpose of maintaining the world. Fortunately for us, this demon who was a torment to the worlds has been slain by you, and we too, O Lord, are now at ease, in devotion to your lotus feet." Purport: the material world consists of three modes: goodness, passion, and ignorance. But the spiritual world is pure goodness. It is said here that the form of the Lord is pure goodness, which means that it is not material. In the material world there is no pure goodness. In the Bhagavatam, the stage of pure goodness is called Sattvam Visuddham. Visuddham means pure. In pure goodness there is no contamination by the two inferior qualities, namely passion and ignorance. The form of the boar, therefore, in which the Lord appeared, is nothing of the material world. There are many other forms of the Lord, but none of them belong to the material qualities. Such forms are non-different from the Vishnu form, and Vishnu is the enjoyer of all sacrifices. The sacrifices which are recommended in the Vedas are meant to please the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In ignorance only, people try to satisfy many other agents, but the real purpose of life is to satisfy the Supreme Lord, Vishnu. All sacrifices are meant to please the Supreme Lord. The living entities who know this perfectly well are called demigods, godly or almost God. Since the living entity is part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, it is his duty to serve the Lord and please him. The demigods are all attached to the personality of Godhead, and for their pleasure the demon, who was a source of trouble to the world, was killed. Purified life is meant to please the Lord, and all sacrifices performed in purified life are called Krishna consciousness. This Krishna consciousness is developed by devotional service, as clearly mentioned here. Text 31. Sri Maitreya continued, after thus killing the most formidable demon Hiranyaksha, the Supreme Lord Hari, the origin of the boar species, returned to his own abode, where there is always an uninterrupted festival. The Lord was praised by all the demigods, headed by Brahma. Purport. The Lord is spoken of herewith as the origin of the boar species, as stated in the Vedanta Sutra 112. The absolute truth is the origin of everything. Therefore it is to be understood that all 8,400,000 species of bodily forms originate from the Lord, who is always Adi, or the beginning. In Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna addresses the Lord as Adyam, or the original. Similarly, in the Brahma Samhita, the Lord is addressed as Adipurusham, the original person. Indeed, in Bhagavad Gita 10.8, the Lord himself declares, Matasharvam pravartate, from me everything proceeds. In this situation, the Lord assumed the shape of a boar to kill the demon Hiranyaksha and pick up the earth from the Garbha ocean. Thus he became Adi Shukara, the original boar. In the material world, a boar or pig is considered most abominable, but the Adi Shukara, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, was not treated as an ordinary boar. Even Lord Brahma and other demigods praised the Lord's form as a boar. This verse confirms the statement in Bhagavad Gita that the Lord appears as he is from his transcendental abode for the sake of killing the miscreants and saving the devotees. By killing the demon Hiranyaksha, he fulfilled his promise to kill the demons and always protect the demigods headed by Brahma. The statement that the Lord returned to his own abode indicates that he has his own particular transcendental residence. Since he is full of all energies, he is all-pervasive in spite of his residing in Goloka Vrindavana, just as the sun, although situated in a particular place within the universe, is present by its sunshine throughout the universe. Although the Lord has his particular abode in which to reside, he is all-pervasive. The impersonalists accept one aspect of the Lord's features, the all-pervasive aspect, but they cannot understand his localized situation in his transcendental abode, where he always engages in fully transcendental pastimes. Especially mentioned in this verse is the word akanditotsavam. Utsava means pleasure. Whenever some function takes place to express happiness, it is called utsava. Utsava, the expression of complete happiness, is always present in the Vaikuntha Lokas, the abode of the Lord, who is worshipable even by demigods like Brahma, to say nothing of other less important entities such as human beings. The Lord descends from his abode to this world, and therefore he is called Avatara, which means one who descends. Sometimes Avatara is understood to refer to an incarnation who assumes a material form of flesh and bone, but actually Avatara refers to one who descends from higher regions. The Lord's abode is situated far above this material sky, and he descends from the higher position. Thus he is called Avatara. Text 32. Maitreya continued, My dear Vidura, I have explained to you the personality of Godheads coming down as the first boar incarnation and killing in a great fight a demon of unprecedented prowess as if he were just a plaything. This has been narrated by me as I heard it from my predecessor spiritual master. Purport. Here the sage Maitreya admits that he explained the incident of the killing of Hiranyaksha by the Supreme Personality of Godhead as a straight narration. He did not manufacture anything or add interpretation, but explained whatever he had heard from his spiritual master. Thus he accepted as bona fide the system of parampara, or receiving the transcendental message in disciplic succession. Unless received by this bona fide process of hearing from a spiritual master, the statement of an acharya or preceptor cannot be valid. It is also stated here that although the demon Hiranyaksha was unlimited in prowess, he was just like a doll for the Lord. A child breaks so many dolls without real endeavor. Similarly, although a demon may be very powerful and extraordinary in the eyes of an ordinary man in the material world, to the Lord, killing such a demon is no difficulty. He can kill millions of demons as simply as a child plays with dolls and breaks them. Text 33. Sri Sutta Goswami continued, My dear Brahmana, Kasata, Vidura, the great devotee of the Lord, achieved transcendental bliss by hearing the narration of the pastimes of the Supreme Personality of Godhead from the authoritative source of the sage Kasharava Maitreya, and he was very pleased. Purport. If anyone wants to derive transcendental pleasure by hearing the pastimes of the Lord, he must hear from the authoritative source, as explained here. Maitreya heard the narration from his bona fide spiritual master, and Vidura also heard from Maitreya. One becomes an authority simply by presenting whatever he has heard from his spiritual master, and one who does not accept a bona fide spiritual master cannot be an authority. This is clearly explained here. If one wants to have transcendental pleasure, he must find a person with authority. It is also stated in the Bhagavatam that simply by hearing from an authoritative source, with the ear and the heart, one can relish the pastimes of the Lord. Otherwise, it is not possible. Sanatana Goswami, therefore, has especially warned that one should not hear anything about the personality of the Lord from the lips of a non-devotee. Non-devotees are considered to be like serpents, as milk is poisoned by a serpent's touch. So, although the narration of the pastimes of the Lord is as pure as milk, when administered by serpent-like non-devotees, it becomes poisonous. Not only does it have no effect in transcendental pleasure, but it is dangerous also. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has warned that no description of the pastimes of the Lord should be heard from the Mayavada or impersonalist school. He has clearly said, Mayavadi Bhashya Sunili Haya Sharvanasa. If anyone hears the Mayavadi's interpretation of the pastimes of the Lord, or their interpretation of Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, or any other Vedic literature, then he is doomed. Once one is associated with impersonalists, he can never understand the personal feature of the Lord and his transcendental pastimes. Sutta Goswami was speaking to the sages headed by Sanaka, and therefore he addressed them in this verse as Dvija, twice born. The sages assembled in Namisaranya, hearing Srimad Bhagavatam from Sutta Goswami, were all Brahmanas, but to acquire the qualifications of a Brahmana is not everything. Merely to be twice born is not perfection. Perfection is attained when one hears the pastimes and activities of the Lord from a bona fide source. Text 34. What to speak of hearing the pastimes of the Lord, whose chest is marked with Srivatsa? People may take transcendental pleasure even in hearing the works and deeds of the devotees, whose fame is immortal. Purport. Bhagavatam literally means the pastimes of the Lord and the Lord's devotees. For example, there are pastimes of Lord Krishna and narrations of devotees like Prahlada, Dhruva, and Maharaja Ambarisha. Both pastimes pertain to the Supreme Personality of Godhead because the devotees' pastimes are in relation with him. The Mahabharata, for example, the history of the Pandavas and their activities, is sacred because the Pandavas had a direct relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead.